this to me goes back to what I did not expect to be the theme of this conversation, but how hilariously predictable humans are. So Ray Dalio takes a very economic view of the world, and he's like, oh, hey, by the way, what he calls the big cycle is so predictable that he broke it down into 6 phases, and every empire has gone through these 6 phases. They last for roughly like 100 to 150 years. America's basically at the end of the 100-year cycle. And phase 6 is total collapse, war, basically. And the old world order falls apart. There's usually a violent war, and then a new world order is established. And we're like clockwork on the cycle from a money perspective, from a division perspective, like everything just lines up. So you have to have an internal populace that is divided. You need to get yourself over your skis from a debt perspective, which we've done. You have to start printing money like crazy. And there has to be a new superpower on the rise. Like it's the stage is set. And the stage was set in World War II, which is how we became the dominant power. To your point about waking a sleeping dragon. Sleeping dragon woke up, but now we're in trouble. So that's my overly simplistic view of why this worked. It was sort of a fluke, not a fluke, but it was we hit the cycle at just the right moment when the British Empire collapsed at the end of World War II. Because of our geography, we weren't destroyed by bombs. So we come out of the war pretty much unscathed. So we ramp up all of our production capabilities. We absolutely crush it. We help win. We create the nuclear bomb. Just a lot of things come together. And so then we're established as the world reserve currency. Because it's not like we weren't divided before then, but we got to really enjoy a hot minute of prosperity. Does that seem like the right breakdown of why we could overcome our differences previously and now we can't? Like, how do you...
Yeah, I don't think it's wrong. I don't think it's wrong at all. I think that it's interesting to me because it sounds like Ray Dalio, one of the reasons you respect him so much is because his analysis is based in economics.
And he's put his money where his mouth is.
Economics and economists have long been viewed as the true predictors of future prosperity. At CIA, we lean heavily into economic studies. Economic experts, economic analysis, the law of economics, because the law of economics is that of the law of scarcity. One of the first and most underrated economists out there was actually a Soviet economist, a guy named Kondratiev. Kondratiev created what's known as the Kondratiev wave, the Kondratiev cycle. That cycle essentially puts us, it explains the pattern of interstate conflict or intrastate conflict, where countries compete, actually go to war with each other. And it puts it on about a 25-year cycle. 25 years to a peak in conflict, 25 years to a drop in conflict. And then as the wave continues, like most waves, the actual peak of the waves expands. So it goes from being 25 years to then 32 years to 32 years. And you start to see this longer, slower wave, right? But it's still a wave, form. The next peak of conflict, according to Kondratiev's wave, against the United States' point of view, happens in about 2024, 2025.
Oh, great.
Europe has to grow out of this mindset.
Europe has to grow out of the mindset that Europe's problems are the world's problems. But the world's problems are not Europe's problems. The world cannot be that Eurocentric as it used to be in the past. Europe
so if you
has
can pause this, I'm going to go to the sit-down you and Tucker had. This was one of the ones a couple months ago, where he's talking about, I was never a Trump guy, and I've seen him, of course. I'm like, what is this guy talking about? He's out of his mind. And then one day he asked the question and says, who funds NATO? I'm like, who gives a shit about who funds NATO? And you remember this exchange with him. And he said, then I started looking, I was like, yo, why are we doing this much money? Why are we putting so much more? He says, the more and more I saw him asking this question, I'm like, okay, these are very, very good questions. So why do you think for the longest time, Europe has gotten away with everybody having to support them, but when it comes down to them having to pay the bill, they're like, no, it's kind of like a friend you go to a restaurant with, and I'll do another old-fashioned, oh, pal, let's do another old-fashioned, and when it comes down for the bill, they get up and go to the bathroom. Europe seems to be doing that, and the other guy gets the bill, and the guy that gets the bill is U.S. the mindset of the military-industrial complex with what's happened with Ukraine. And yesterday, Joe Biden talking about the fact he was asked about, will we give them F-16 fighter jets? And Biden says, not today. Will you one day give them? I can't answer that question, but I think we ought to start training. And the U.S. officials said we will not, turn away from any other country who wants to support them with F-16. Essentially what they're saying is we went from money to tanks to this to now we're probably going to give them some F-16s. So why is your concern so high? Or a lot of people, why are so many people concerned about military-industrial complex? Why should that be a top priority for them?
So we now have multiple economists basically saying that there's a peak coming, a peak of conflict coming. And that conflict for the Kondratiev wave is a peak of popular conflict and unpopular conflict. So we're coming off of an unpopular conflict, right? Afghanistan and Iraq largely turned into an unpopular conflict at the end, right? And the wave between when that started and when the next wave is coming is right in that 25-year mark, right? So according to Kondratiev, we are not only coming up on a period of conflict, but it will be popular inside the United States. So people will rally behind that conflict. That doesn't mean we're going to win. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be in our best interest, but it does mean, to your point earlier, that we might see that moment where everybody kind of comes together again. I think part of the reason that we were able to be successful was because of the same rules of economics that you laid out from World War II. Our country, hugely unpopular. Western expansion was hugely unpopular at the time. The Civil War, nobody wants to see the Civil War again. Most people would say the Civil War was a traumatic and horrible, loss of life. At the time, there was no other option. Abraham Lincoln had no option except to pursue civil war because he knew that the presidents before him had been working to create a single solitary nation that had national security from coast to coast. We can say it was a fight for states' rights. We can say it was a fight for slavery. We can say it was a fight for lots of things. And those are also true, but they may not be the number one reason why the Civil War was so important. The Civil War was so important because we needed to remain one unified country from coast to coast to have American primacy in the long run. American primacy is a concept that was created by Alexander Hamilton.
Really?
American primacy is not new. There's an entire society out there called the Alexander Hamilton Society that's focused on preserving the ideals of Alexander Hamilton and the founding fathers, who all believed that a strong United States meant a strong world because they saw and lived through the oppression of living under a monarchy.
There's a number of reasons why. Let's start with the most important that we're talking about. That as we sit here today, we are on the brink of nuclear war. That should be concerning to everyone. It should be even more concerning that we have people in positions of consequence and power and influence, both those who hold public office in the highest offices of the land, as well as those who don't, but who are just as influential, talking about the prospects of nuclear war as though it is just like any other kind of war, talking about the fact that Putin and his government has changed their policies to make it so that they can deploy nuclear weapons, whether they be tactical nuclear weapons or strategic nuclear weapons, if they feel that they are facing an existential threat, specifically omitting the words an existential threat because of a nuclear threat or nuclear weapons. So whatever they deem, for any reason, to be an existential threat will give them the authority to be able to deploy these nuclear weapons. The fact that we have these pundits, these talking heads, these government officials discussing the prospects of nuclear war as though it is something that can be won is shocking and extremely dangerous. Ronald Reagan had the most famous and most important statement after he negotiated some of these non-nuclear proliferation treaties, telling us very clearly, a nuclear war can never be won and should never be fought, period. Things have only gotten worse. Things haven't gotten better since then. We have more nuclear weapons. They have become more sophisticated. A nuclear weapon would kick off nuclear war that would destroy all of humanity. The military-industrial complex plays a major role in continuing to keep us in some state of war. Why? And some of them have even said it publicly. When we are at war, business is good.
2 of them are democracies. The other 3 are monarchies, right? So the idea that democracy is the solution to all wealth and success hasn't really been proven yet. We're still outnumbered by monarchies, right? So what does the future hold? The future will be conflict is coming. Multiple economists have pointed to it. You can see the writing on the wall, what my wife and I call the writing on the wall. Conflict is coming. What will that conflict look like is the bigger question. You talked earlier about how, you and I might be of the same ilk when it comes to, are we already engaged in World War III? Is World War III coming up? What will that World War look like? There is conflict coming. There is no reason for us to think it will look like it looked in World War II. If anything, conflict has proven to us that it evolves and changes just like technology and just like human thinking, right? But it's still predictable because it takes human beings to wage war. I don't think I'm answering your question very well here, but this is where my brain goes.
Stage. So my question is, do you see this as a conflict with China? Does it become open warfare? Is this going to be over Taiwan? Or the Russia-Ukraine thing spills over into something? How do you see this playing out?
So my honest anticipation, what I expect will happen, is that China will make a legal move on Taiwan. What China did in Hong Kong was legal first. They changed the laws in Hong Kong. They changed the laws in China, which then changed the laws in Hong Kong, which made it legal for them to go in and take Hong Kong by force. In 2019, right before COVID hit, the whole world watched, and it happened. And the whole world complained and threw a fit and leveraged sanctions and said it was unfair and unjust and everything else. And then the Chinese did it anyways. And now here it is 2023, and most people don't even remember what happened in Hong Kong just 4 years ago. Now they're watching what's happening in Ukraine. Now in Ukraine, some people say that what happened in Ukraine is that the world rallied behind Ukraine by giving them weapons and giving them training and giving them resources. The most limited resource in Ukraine is Ukrainian soldiers. It's not tanks or guns or howitzers. The thing that will run out first is Ukrainian fighters. That's it's a shame to me to watch what's happening because the Ukrainian fighting force is putting up such a valiant fight. They're doing everything they possibly can to equip every warfighter to be worth 10, 20, 30, 50 Russian fighters, right? But that's their most limited resource. They're not going to be able to create more Russian fighters in the next 3 to 5 years. You can't turn a 5-year-old into an 18-year-old. So that's the resource. That's the clock that Zelensky knows he's fighting against, that he's racing against, is not a clock of fighter jets or missile defense systems. It's how am I going to find enough fighters? And NATO and the West know that they don't want to put their boots in Ukraine fighting the Russians, because that's all it would take for the Russians to basically say, hey, NATO allies are killing Russians, so now Russia can kill NATO allies. And because Russia is a nuclear power, they essentially have the same the same trump card that we had in World War II. So nobody in NATO wants to mess with that trump card.
You believe it will be inevitable that there will be forced conflict?
We've got a significantly increased defence.
A once-in-a-generation look at whether our ATF is fit for purpose.
The United States will go to war if necessary in order to protect Taiwan.
Of course, we have alliance obligations. What we don't have is strike capabilities.
The Chinese PLA has 975,000 troops. How long, realistically, could you hold them off?
We will fight as long as it takes.
Victory is anything but assured. Are we ready for war?
We are acting as quickly as we can.
I pray that they will get it right.
It's been just over 8 decades since war came to Australia. Since then, we've fought and died in many a battle, all far from home. So can it happen again? Yes. With China's continuing push into the Western Pacific, the prospect of conflict in our region has never been higher, which raises some very real questions. Can Australia defend itself? And are we ready for war?
Are we ready for war?
I don't think we are.
We've got a time period now where we must prepare for the worst case.
We would probably be looking at losses that we haven't seen since the Second World War.
Some of Australia's finest military minds are worried.
This is a national challenge that Australia has.
Former Major General Mick Ryan is one of them.
We face a range of cyber, economic, informational, political, diplomatic and military challenges with the coercion of the Chinese Communist Party that are well beyond anything we've seen before. It is a national challenge, not just a military one.
Welcome, family, to another edition of Stranger Thinking Media. This is Yeshayahu, where we bring you the gospel of Yahushua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ, to address the problems of a modern world. Today's topic: what is the first rule of Fight Club? World War III. Operation Mayhem, Part 3. Topic 1, Gog of Magog. Topic 2, King of the East. 4 Ezra chapter 11. Then I heard a voice saying to me, "Look in front of you and consider what you see." When I looked, I saw what seemed to be a lion roused from the forest, roaring, and I heard how it uttered with a human voice to the eagle, and spoke, saying, "Listen, and I will speak to you. The Most High says to you, are you not the one that remains of the 4 beasts that I had made to reign in my world, so that the end of my times might come through them? You, the 4th beast that has come, have conquered all the beasts that have gone before, and you have held sway over the world with great terror, and over the earth with grievous suppression." So Daniel chapter 11. So the king of the north shall come and cast up a mount and take the most fenced cities, and the arms of the south shall not withstand, neither his chosen people, neither shall there be any strength to withstand. Now here we have a picture of Vladimir Putin. Most people associate Russia with Magog, Gog of Magog, and I'm going to do a video dedicated to Gog of Magog, because there's more to that story than most people realize or most people think. But generally, when they talk about the King of the North, they are probably, most likely, in the latter days, at the end times, talking about the what modern day Roman Empire, which would be a kind of a conglomeration of the EU and the North American nations. However, there are other prophecies which dictate there should be or might be a split there, and that the power of the Roman Empire goes back to Europe. So there's a lot to discuss there, a lot to digest, but that's not the purpose of this particular video. So we'll just kind of keep that in mind and carry on. Revelation 16. And the 6th angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates. And we see that happening now, where the Euphrates River is actually drying up. Again, not saying that this is necessarily the moment, but as you can see, the Euphrates can dry up, which would prepare the way for an Eastern army to just walk across, dry land, basically. And the water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. And I saw 3 unclean spirits, like frogs, come up out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. My tongue getting tongue-tied here. For they are the spirits of devils working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth and of the whole world, to gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty. Behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he that watcheth and keepeth his garments, lest he walk naked and they see his shame. And he gathered them together into a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon. So the point to all of this is that there's going to be a conflict, and we would call it World War III, and it's going to engage all the nations of the earth in one shape or another. And, all this must come to pass. So I know a lot of people are afraid of this, this topic or this moment. But just like other things, if you're in the Messiah, or as Christians would say, in Christ, there should be a certain level of peace. Like in the video, the lady said, nuclear war would end all humanity. That's not true. Nuclear war would completely, they talk about the Great Reset, that would completely reset everything. And that would set us back to what people call the Stone Ages. But in an odd sense, at the rate we're going, that would probably save the earth. The earth is a living organism that would heal itself. And man does not have the right or the authority to annihilate all life. As it is written, except those days be shortened, all flesh would be destroyed. But what does that insinuate? That those days will be shortened. The creator of heaven and earth is not going to allow the Satans to destroy his creation. He's got a plan, and he will fulfill that plan. And so at that moment, and we have to get to that moment, I know that sounds scary, but he says, unless he cut those days short, all flesh would be destroyed, which means we have to be at that point where all flesh is about to be annihilated. That is where he comes in and stops it. But there's a lesson to be learned through all of that. At that point, the people, like it says in the scriptures, those nations that remain shall go up from year to year to Jerusalem to bow down before the great king. So as you can see, these things must come to pass. This world, for Satan is the god of this world system must be brought to an end. So man who has followed the ways of the Satans are going to see what the culmination of that is. And sometimes you have to learn a really hard lesson before you wake up. And that's why, that last little bit there with the little slap to the face, I'm trying to tell you, wake up. Everything that you are doing, everything that the world system is doing, you got to understand, it's not an accident. There are people who are empowered by the Satans to destroy, and their reward is riches in this present time. And they are on a mission to enslave and destroy. So don't think this is odd, and don't think you can fix it. It's not fixable, because the people in power have no intention of fixing it. They intend on complete and total domination of this planet. But they're being lied to. They're being deceived. And because of their greed and avarice, they're going to walk down that path to destruction. It's deeper than you know. Revelation 19. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth, and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse, and against his army. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them. Understand, deceived them that had received the mark of the beast. And we'll talk more about that, what that is. And them that worshipped his image. We need to stop depicting these holy images. You guys don't know what you're worshiping. You think you know. And you'd be offended if I told you what you were worshiping, because you wouldn't believe it. And that's how deceived mankind is. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire burning with brimstone, and the remnant were slain with the sword of him that sat upon the horse, which sword proceeded out of his mouth. Out of his mouth, his words. His words. He can calm the sea. He can calm raging storms, or he can raise up raging storms. He can raise up the insects and the locusts. He can raise up the bacteria and the viruses. He can, through the power of his word, just by calling it forth, he can tell a mountain to uproot itself and throw itself in the sea. He can open his mouth and tell the earth to open up and swallow up everything. And all the fowls were filled with their flesh. So family, that's all I have for you today. It's Operation Mayhem. Got more to come on that front. Farewell. I love you all so much. Thank you so much for continually supporting my content. If you did enjoy this video, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, and share this with your friends and family. I'm sure they find it interesting as well. I'm very excited to continue this journey with you. I thank you all for bringing certain stories to my attention and for continually keeping me updated with certain events around the world. I very much appreciate you all, and shout out to the channel members. Keep doing what you're doing. I appreciate it. May everybody have a beautiful and blessed day. Who's in the body of Messiah, Yahushua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ of Nazareth. And I'll see you all on the next video. Shalom.